Hello, and welcome to a Hollywood edition of
The Lume Plotters.
Hollywood, Bollywood, Tollywood, and everything
No, I don't think
else.
we're going to go into Bollywood this time, but just Hollywood.
Well, yeah, okay.
So today's topic is obviously we've seen a lot of watches pop up in movies and shows, and we want to kind of talk through what are some of the kind of cool ones that we've seen, that we've noticed. A lot of them, I'm sure we're going to forget. A lot of the names of the movies we're going to forget. But nonetheless, we're going to talk through the times when we've paused a movie and tried to go up to the TV screen and manually zoomed in on something to see what watch someone was wearing.
Exactly.
And recently, there's been two shows, and that's why this came to my mind. I'll talk you through these two, and I did some digging. Sometimes there are websites that you can access where other people will debate what watches someone is wearing on screen. So there's some cool stuff out there when it comes to Hollywood.
It's just sometimes it's bugging me out. And that's when you go onto the internet and you research, you do reverse image searches and all of this stuff, in order to find out what watch is this person wearing on screen, because it's super important that I know. Of course, spouses of the world are being, getting frustrated and angry because you're pausing the screen and then you're walking up to the TV and trying to look at it or something like that. It's exactly. So
we'll
for
start
today,
with the very big ones, right? We'll start with both.
For today, your two hosts are Patrick Bateman and Doc Brown.
I want to be Patrick Bateman.
Okay, Patrick Bateman, you, and I am Doc Brown from Back to the Future. And we will
what does
figure
he
out
have to do with anything?
He wore a watch, no?
Did he?
I don't know. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. All right,
Yep.
so let's go. We'll get into it with some very famous ones. These are the ones that everyone should know, and then we'll go into ours. Let's both kind of pick one each.
Okay.
All time most, or before we do, should we do the wristwatch check?
Oh, okay. Go for it.
All right. I'm still wearing my beautiful Pelagos 39 that you might have seen before. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but I got it from this
inside information. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy sold it to me. It was absolutely out of his mind.
Yeah, silly person.
He probably needed it for drug money, I think. He didn't seem
totally.
normal.
Totally. Yeah, he spent it all on African and Eastern and MMI. It's I heard inside information that you are the second owner of this watch who got it new from a dealer. So yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, I'm wearing.
Told you this?
I'm wearing my Kampfschwimmer, my Navy SEALs
IWC.
homage. Yeah, the IWC Porsche design 80s homage from Thorn watches.
We're both wearing titanium.
Yeah. Actually, I last episode I said I have my only titanium watch. It's the Pelagos, but it isn't, because now this one is also titanium.
Yes.
And of course, my Grand Seiko is titanium, which I always forget because it doesn't look like titanium.
That's grade 5 though, right? So this is grade 2. So apparently what I've realized is grade 5 has much more of a sheen of stainless steel.
Yeah.
And can be polished, but grade 2 cannot. Grade 2 is much darker, but it's pure titanium. None of this mixed nonsense that grade 5 provides you, right? Grade 5 has a lot of benefits, such as increased scratch resistance. But it's essentially a mishmash of vanadium and other materials, right? Grade 2 titanium is titanium as we know it. It's pure. Grade 5 is also harder to work on.
Yeah.
So it costs more generally.
And then there's also grade 23, right?
I'm not familiar with 23.
Grade 23, which is so funny because there's 2, there's 5, and there's 2-3 or 23, which is basically 2 plus 3 is 5. So I have no idea what this is and why that is, but there's apparently also this one. And then there's combinations of, some watch brands actually use a combination of grade 5 and grade 2 for different parts of the case and the bracelet. It's incredible. So many different things with titanium.
Yeah.
Do you know any titanium watch worn in movies?
That's a hard one.
I'm
I'm going to say the Top Gun movies had the IWCs in them, and I'm guessing those were
true.
Ceratanium.
The new ones, maybe.
Yeah, the
You
new
mean
movie, the
new
one that
Top
just
Gun, okay.
recently came out.
Right,
I
right,
think
right.
those are Ceratanium, so that would be as titanium as I think.
Yeah, because if I think about the original Top Gun from 86,
Those weren't. No, those
that
were,
was Porsche design.
and those were stainless steel with
Porsche
the
design.
PVD coating.
But
But
Porsche
I don't
design
know.
also did a lot of. I had a Porsche design that was titanium, so they also do a lot of titanium. Yeah.
Now, all right, let's go back to actual famous movies. So
actually,
I think there is.
you are Maverick then?
No, I would
No.
not be Maverick. I would be Iceman.
You are Iceman. Oh, right.
I'm Iceman. Yeah.
I was told once I looked like Iceman with my old
You
hairstyle.
do. You do is your haircut.
Exactly.
What's his name?
Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer, yeah.
Yeah.
So once in a while, I
Rest in
don't know if
peace.
he's still alive.
No, he died. This
He
year.
died a few
Yeah.
years ago, right? And
Was it a few years? This was last
think-
year.
was it last year? I don't know. But he pops up in these random movies here and there, and I'm like, Val Kilmer again. And the amount of stuff that he's in, and the amount of like crap that he's in, it's unbelievable, right? You'll be watching
Yeah.
like How I Met Your Mother, and it's Val Kilmer in it, and you're just like,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
is Val Kilmer in this like B-rate TV series?
He died just 1 month ago, 1st of April.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, he had this throat cancer or whatever he has. And
Yeah, so maybe I knew that he had cancer, but yeah. So nonetheless, okay, I don't know any
By
watch
the
that
way,
he wore.
I got just yesterday a video on my YouTube feed, and it was Val Kilmer in Heat, right? When he's fighting cops on two different sides of the road. And the commentator used this clip and said, this clip is actually made it into instruction videos of Fort Bragg, where they actually teach their not special forces, that's I
Really?
think FBI or FBI agents or whatever on these. And he said, if this actor can change the magazine in one without cut, yeah, in one scene, so quickly and
Then you
efficiently
should
and
be able
continue
to.
shooting, this is what you need to beat, right? Because if an actor can do this, you have to do this. And it was praised a lot, this performance, because they had, I think, weeks of training with British gun specialists before they shot this movie. So they really did very, very well on handling everything correctly. I don't know which watch he was wearing, though. And
Nonetheless, in the meantime, while you were rambling, I looked up, and yes, it was the Porsche design in Top Gun,
of
and
course
it was steel in black PVD. So that was the one. Now, okay, let's talk about famous movies, right? Kind of when you think watches,
Yep.
what, movie watch pops into my, to your mind, to my mind. So for me, I think there's two that have defined watches in general, right? One, I'm going to go with the movie sucked. It was a terrible movie, but it was Le Mans, right? Le Mans
and
had the original Tag Heuer Monaco.
Monaco.
And this was, Steve McQueen, always a badass. And essentially what happened was, I remember hearing about this. That was not the watch that they wanted to put.
Really?
And Steve McQueen said, no, I want that one. And he himself chose the watch. Yeah.
He's
So,
around the back alley and he has this big trench coat and
he
he says
chose
watches.
this watch and essentially became the Steve McQueen Monaco. But it was going to be a Carrera. That's what it originally was going to be. But now, once again, despite the movie being crap, it's just, that is the Tag Heuer Monaco. And that to me is super cool.
I admire Steve McQueen for just the photographs that exist of him.
I'm sitting there with a gun and a cigar or whatever it was,
Yeah,
or
whatever
a
it is.
cigarette, and he's just
This
with a
guy
freaking
was
bun
so
strap on with a
cool.
Daytona. I mean, it's just nuts.
He was just so cool, and he had this. So he defined style. It's just like a bit like these Chuck Norris
He
memes, right?
was
Because
the
it's like
guy.
style doesn't find him; he defines the style. Whatever.
He did.
crazy.
And to this day, I only wear my Persol sunglasses because of him. Because he's just so cool.
Yeah,
The
he's-
Persol 649s and the 714s. That's what he did. And he always looked so cool in them. So
So if I had to choose a movie watch, then it would be obviously a watch that I'm more or less wearing, or was wearing until I changed to my Thorn watch, which is the Luminor from Panerai Marina. Because
Okay, and which movie was this?
That was in the movie. Well, let me think. What is this called? The movie. This was not.
It was called Daylight.
Daylight,
Jeez.
exactly. Yeah, Daylight from Sylvester Stallone, and he's this famous scenes where he's anyhow. There's a lot of water.
He's essentially trapped inside a tunnel, and there was like an accident or something that happened, and then
I remember. Yeah.
Was it fire that was coming, or something was? Explosions, hand grenades,
so, and he had this watch on, and wasn't really even selling watches so much through end users. It was a small watch shop in I don't know, Florence or so. I don't know, in Rome. He found the watch.
It was in Florence. Florence.
Anyhow, so basically he saw the watch, wore the watch, and then eventually even convinced them to make watches in his own Sly Tech. Because Sylvester Stallone has its nickname is Sly.
Sly, yeah.
Right, for whatever reason. So he has created some in Sly Tech that are basically co-designed by him or whatever. I have no idea. Anyhow, so he was basically making Panerai big. You can say that. He gave them the breakthrough of wearing these watches.
He did, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's for the entire movie, but if I looked at some stills of it, and he wore the watch on the right hand for a while in the movie. I don't know if that's the entire movie or not, but yeah, whatever. I mean, it's that was very, very for me one of the iconic moments of where a watch was actually defined by a movie, right? Where after that actually happened. I mean, there's lots of things where the watch plays a role in the movie, like in Hamilton with the Murph, right? For in Interstellar.
We'll get to that one. We'll talk about that one. Obviously, it has to be on the list.
But I feel in generally that this was one of the things where an entire brand got the kickstart from a movie.
From this,
yeah. That's why I bring it up. Not only because I wear it, and it's only 1996, which in my world was just yesterday.
I know, and this is sad because I'm thinking to myself, when you say 1975, I'm like, that was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And then when you say 2005, and I'm like, that was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is theoretically problematic for me because in 2005, 1975 was 30 years prior. If you tell me 95, I'm like, yeah, I was around the corner. Yeah. And that means I'm getting old.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. We're getting old. So 1996, that's nearly 30 years ago.
And in the same time zone, I'll go into the same time. The other thing that got huge, and I remember this distinctly, and this was the first watch I ever really, really wanted, was the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies. And I wanted that frickin' Seamaster, the blue wave dial Seamaster. I wanted it so bad. Couldn't afford it. But I wanted it so. That was the first watch that I was like, I have to have it.
See, and that's so funny because I looked at that watch so many times in these movies, and James Bond, of course, all of the James Bond movies, I watched them all, but I never liked this watch. And I actually was the one who actually had a Seamaster, the blue.
Yeah,
Seamaster.
I didn't like it. I liked it, never could. But then now that I could get one, I don't want it. So it's very strange.
Yeah.
But of course, then that goes back all the way to Dr. No in the first James Bond movie.
Yeah, well,
of him wearing that, Rolex Submariner on that tiny little 16 millimeter strap, and it was like huge spring bar
obviously a detail
on either
that only
side.
Martin remembers.
He doesn't care, and that's what's so cool. That was 1960, and he just did not give a shit, and that's what made it so cool. Is this showed this aura of, look at this guy. His strap is clearly the wrong size and he doesn't care. As the Italians would say, this is sprezzatura. Right?
Sprezzatura?
Yes.
Wabi sabi? What is this? Deliberately imperfect?
Is that what it's at? No, it's essentially having style without actually trying.
Oh,
I think
yes.
Sprezzatura is, sprezzatura. So the Italian word that refers to a effortless grace. The art of making something difficult look easy and maintaining a nonchalant demeanor. So essentially just not
have this,
caring, right?
Yeah,
But
not caring. And
this is Steve McQueen.
I think it's,
he is
exactly.
Sprezzatura.
That is just a confidence or whatever it might be. He just wears things and he doesn't give a shit if they are in or not in.
I know,
and it doesn't
that's what's
matter.
so cool.
Yeah.
It's like me and my jean jackets. I guess this
close.
can go two ways.
I would say close. You're comparing yourself to
because
Steve
I don't
McQueen,
care
man.
either at this point. But I saw a picture the other day of some guy, and it was like the 1990s, and he was wearing like these super short shorts, a polo shirt, like I don't know, Lacoste or something, a navy blue blazer, and gray New Balance, sneakers. And I'm like, none of this should work, but somehow he looks extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of these things, like, why would you be wearing a blazer if you're wearing New Balances and with shorts nonetheless? And none of it comes together, but it was
some things just sort of work, and some things look comical. I mean, look, if I am looking back to the 80s, I mean, what the hell we were wearing in the 80s? It is just, if you were a teenager in the 80s and 90s, you wore things that should never have been produced, should never have been worn together, from leg warmers to sweatbands to vests and to, all of your sweatshirts that you pushed into your trousers. It just boggles my mind of how terribly bad it was. And the style was just everything goes, and it shouldn't have. But anyhow, it was very distinct.
It is. But it takes you a while. Back then, nobody knows what their style is. And now, everyone has their own formula of what they wear, and then it's their thing, right? I mean,
but the good thing is, in the 80s, there was no brand, focus. Really, it didn't matter where you got the stuff from, right? If you got a leather belt,
you had to have Nikes and you had to have Tommy Hilfiger. Those were the two kind of big ones.
I think that was
Hilfiger
maybe
was
in the US,
late,
but not in the
in the US. That was the going thing.
I remember distinctly in Europe.
Huge Tommy Hilfiger logo, like color block shirts. It was ridiculously disgusting. Nonetheless, okay, let's move forward.
Other
James
watches.
Bond and all of the watches, and that, of course, goes with the new Speedmasters as well.
So these are the two that we find specifically important.
Yeah, because of course one kicked off the Speedmaster thing, or Seamaster thing, sorry, and the other one was the sub, right? That kicked off watches in James Bond.
No, for me it was the Panerai, sorry. That kicked off the brand.
No, I'm saying that kicked off James Bond wearing watches.
Right, James Bond, yes.
There was no Panerais in James Bond. He never wore one. He was too classy for that.
Stallone, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I found interesting to see is when you look at sometimes the brands that tried that, and I want to bring up kickstarting their brand.
Oh yeah, okay.
With a movie appearance or sponsoring the movie and getting a prominent wrist shots basically in the movie. Mm-hmm. Two I want to mention there. One is the John Wick franchise and Karl F. Bucherer.
Did you know there's a new John Wick movie coming out?
What is he going to wear?
I just saw it yesterday. It was Wick and something. I don't know. But yeah, saw it yesterday.
I'm going to be very curious of what he's going to wear, because Karl F. Bucherer was, of course, discontinued. The watch
He'll
brand.
Be wearing a Rolex. He's grandfathered in.
But see, it didn't work at all. I mean, in all the John Wick movies, we had the advertisements. Karl F. Bucherer was seen on so many walls, advertisements there, and of course on his wrist, and still it made no difference. Such a unanimously favorite of men movie hero couldn't make this watch brand cool, right? It just didn't work. Then the second one is Venom. You know Venom, Tom Hardy.
Yeah, I never watched it.
It's how these movies are. They're great entertainment, but forgettable. But he was wearing Bremont watches because he was personally a fan of Bremont, and so they eventually sponsored it. And yet, also for Bremont, it didn't really kick it off, right? So it's funny how it's just doesn't seem to work that well. But everybody remembers Patrick Bateman's Rolex Datejust, which was actually not a Datejust in the movie. It was supposed to be one, but they actually used the Seiko for the filming, right? But everybody remembers that, and nobody remembers these watches that are basically put in front of us like very, very prominently.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think actually the James Bond, the famous scene, oh, nice watch, Rolex? No. Omega. Did you think
that was ridiculous. That was ridiculous.
The least hidden product placement in the world.
No, it was so stupidly done. But all right, let me talk about another movie. Because you derailed us a little bit, right? We want to talk about big movies.
Was there a structure to it?
Yeah, there was. We're going to talk about iconic stuff and then go into this other stuff, right?
So, okay.
Neither of those that you talked about are iconic, right? James Bond, icon. Daylight, I give you, because that was a pivotal moment for Panerai. What was the other one we talked about? There was another one. What I already forgot what we talked about. Oh, Tag Heuer Monaco, also pivotal. So let's stick with pivotal. Once we run out of these, we can go into any tangential topics that we want. Another one, you called me Patrick Bateman, right?
Yeah.
So American Psycho.
Yes.
American Psycho with this solid gold, yellow gold, what everybody thinks is a Datejust or a date was actually a Seiko.
Yeah, but he refers to it as a Rolex Datejust.
He does.
Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. And you have to look really, really closely to see that it's not. And I think they did that on purpose, obviously.
Well, yeah, they didn't get one, right?
They could not get the prop master couldn't get a yellow gold Rolex. So they said, yeah, Seiko looks similar. Same, but different. So that's what he wore as, this freaking trader, what do you call them? The investment bro. So that was, of course, a very funny, because once again, some of these are hits where you put the right watch in the right movie. And then some of them are flops where, the people see that, yeah, you chose the wrong watch. Like that does not go. He's not wearing a freaking Seiko. There's no way.
But you know what? Seikos, in general, I might derail it again a bit, but Seikos have been featured in so many movies.
Yes.
Because they were so crazy popular in the 80s, 90s. Because
Apocalypse Now, 1979.
Moonraker, Aliens.
Yeah.
What else comes to mind? Yeah, of course, Doc Brown. That's why I'm Doc Brown today.
Doc Brown was wearing the calculator watch.
Correct.
That was a Casio, not a Seiko.
So sorry. Yeah, it was a Casio. Yeah, but Ghostbusters had a Seiko. Voice Note. Then Mission Impossible had G-Shocks. So Arnold Schwarzenegger
also Casio,
had
by the way. That's also Casio. Alien also Casio.
Sorry. Sorry.
Back to the Future also Casio.
Yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Predator.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Seiko. Arnold, right?
No, the Arnie.
Yeah, the Arnie. When he moved us in, I think it was in Commando or something, he wore this big
The Abyss.
Predator.
Do you remember the movie The Abyss?
Oh, I love that movie, yeah.
James Cameron. Yeah. Also Seiko Turtle.
Yes. Also Seiko, yeah. So Seiko was featured in a lot of watches as well. So yeah. And Casio, as I just mistakenly.
Casio also had a lot of things.
But I loved the Alien choices. I recently nearly bought one in our watch group. The what was his name? Not Sigourney Weaver's character, but the android. What was this name? It's a Giugiaro. Not the Ripley, but the other one. It was called, what is this guy's name? Anyhow. So by the way, they have now assumed the names of the characters in the movie that wear them, right? Not the actors. It's not called the Sigourney Weaver, but it's called the Ripley, because Ripley was the character in Alien who wore that watch. Yeah, and then there was the other one. I forgot it. Anyhow, so there we go.
Interesting. Now, what about one very famous? You mentioned Interstellar. I'll let you talk about Interstellar. Do you remember Interstellar well enough to talk about it?
Yep.
Okay. I will bring up then, before Interstellar, another big important watch, the Speedmaster.
Yes.
There's two movies that I want to talk about. Obviously, Apollo 13. I remember in 2016, 15,
Mhm.
16, whenever I bought my Speedmaster, first thing I did was rewatch Apollo 13. And I thought to myself, I'm
Right.
so wise. I'm going to screw these. They're not going to have the right watch. Not only did they have the right watch, they had close-ups of it. They knew exactly what they were doing. Then there was two. I said I'm going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about three movies with Speedmasters in it. Just recently, Fly Me to the Moon. Did you see it?
Fly me to the moon.
Yes. Absolutely hilarious.
okay.
The whole thing about the moon landing being fake. Essentially, they had a backup in case it didn't work. Like,
Yeah, I didn't see that. No.
it's on Apple TV. It's a fantastic movie. One flaw in this. So it was the lady that was running the PR department. Essentially, NASA was a bunch of calculator, pocket protector nerds, and she said we have the ability to make this cool. Like, why don't we run with it? We could get so many product placements. So she did stuff like Nesquik and Tang and all of this, random product placement and, blah, 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 the astronaut's choice. And then she also got the Omega. They had the Omega watch, but they had no affiliation with Omega besides using the watch. She said, let's lean into this. Let's advertise it. Let's make it popular. So then, of course, Omega agreed to this. And so she gifted in an Omega box to the, this commander of the Apollo 11 mission, the Speedmaster. And he opens the box. And, as Omega, the box was time correct. Everything was time correct except for one thing. Remember, NASA had deemed that the Omega bracelets were too essentially well built. If you got stuck on something, it would essentially rip your arm off before it ripped the watch off. So they said, we cannot have this bracelet on the watch. We need something else. So that's where Forstner entered the market. Forstner, they had the very thin 15 millimeter JB Champion strap. And essentially that one was so poorly built that if the astronaut was doing like an extravehicular walk or something, a spacewalk, and it got stuck on something, it would snap before any damage came to the astronaut. Okay?
And create space debris that would pierce somebody else's spacesuit by the next
she
mission.
gifted the watch already on this JB Champion bracelet in the box, which would have never happened. Who replaced the bracelet? Omega didn't put an aftermarket bracelet on there. True. Yes, it was correct in how the astronauts wore it, but it was not correct in how they presented it because the astronauts would not have opened the box and seen the Omega watch on this bracelet already. They would have had a bracelet on the side, but they would have gotten the original bracelet. And we know this historically because if you go look at Moonwatch Only, the big book that I have, you see that the astronauts in their free time wore their Speedmasters on NATO straps, original bracelets, and on leather straps. They really only wore the Forstner bracelets in flight because they were told to, right? So they had to.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting mistake that movie made. Now, a third movie with the Speedmaster. It was called, let me remember what it was called. The Atom Project. I've mentioned this before. It was a Netflix movie, I think a couple of years ago. And I had no idea. It was with Ryan Reynolds. And I had no idea what I was watching. I was like, okay, it sounds like a good movie. I'll watch it. And it was a guy, he essentially, if I remember correctly, it was really good. It was really good. It was time travel, going back and forward through kind of time and space. And essentially, here's the thing. These guys, this came out it was 2020 it came out, I think. The reason I know this is because the new Moonwatch had come out in 2020. Remember, they replaced the 3861 movement. Mine is the 1861, was discontinued in 2019-ish. And in 2020, we got the new one. So they could have very easily made a mistake on this, because if he's traveling backwards in time, he could have had the wrong Speedmaster, right? So when they're showing him when he bought the watch, he could have, they had a date stamp on it, right? When the time was when he got the watch. And it was his father's watch or something, was passed down. And the easiest thing for them to have done is to go to the Omega store and buy a brand new Speedmaster, which at the time, the Speedmaster being sold would have been too new for this movie.
Right.
Because the 1861 movement would have fit that time frame whenever he was gifted this watch, but the new one would not have. But apparently they thought of this, and they did put the 1861 movement watch in. It got a lot of screen time. But here's the kicker. As he traveled backwards and forwards in time, the age of the leather strap that they put the watch on changed. So essentially, when it was in the future, the watch had been aged. When he was in the past and the watch was new, the leather strap was still brand new. I thought that was insane for the costume director or the costume designer to go to that length.
You know that there's like, I think it started with these TV shows like Lost and all of this stuff, when timelines and the entire thing became so complicated that they had, I think, a crew of 5 people
just to keep it track of what
running the continuity department, just to make sure that everything somehow fits into each timeline, and with each things that you do, that everything makes sense, because everything was in different timelines and whatever, so that you are really sticking with the right things. And then I had Adam Project on my movie list, but I never watched it.
No, it's fantastic.
It's only 3 years ago, right? Yeah.
It was 3 or 2, something around that time. But I remember thinking to myself, if they put the new Speedmaster, it would have been chronologically wrong, and they didn't. So they thought about this.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, look, more and more watch people are getting into movies, or more and more watch people are also working in so many different industries, so that it makes sense that people actually look at it.
Well, the amount of screen time it had, I think that this was an Omega co-branded deal. They wouldn't have put it on the dial.
Look, that was one of the biggest things that Jean-Claude Biver did in his time when he headed Omega, was starting these kind of corporations, this kind of product placement and these deals. And I think this Omega is leading in this, that they actually work together with them and then take care that everything makes sense. And they might even tell the producers and the directors what they should and should not use at specific times.
And now that I remember, there was one more movie with a Speedmaster in it, and it was The Art of Driving in the Rain. Or no, The Art of Racing in the Rain. I don't know if you've seen this one.
Also on my list, it
was a book. I read the book.
It's about a dog, no?
It's about a dog, exactly. But the main character is a race car driver.
Yep.
And he was wearing a Speedmaster. And as the timeline of the movie goes, he wears the Speedmaster on different straps. He had like a Bond NATO at one point, and other time he's wearing it on a bracelet. And the fact that they changed it out was also great, because, you're not going to wear it on a NATO for your entire life, right? So... because it was a large scale, like it was linear time frame. So yes, you could have the same watch, but they put on different straps, which then tells you 100% this was a watch guy that did this. But not just a watch guy, it was a car guy as well, because the cars in the movie were also fantastic. So they did a really good job with both cars and watches, which I was hoping I could, I love picking faults in movies, right? Continuity errors, things like this. I will
bloopers, not bloopers. Sorry,
and
the spoofs. What are they called? Spoofs? Movie
spoofs? No,
not spoof. What is that called? They have
something
trivia errors or something. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, in the book, for instance, and I was doing the same. I read the book, and I was thinking to myself, like, this has got to be a mistake in here somewhere, right? It goes down to they were talking about the Hans device, the head and shoulders. Yeah. So they're talking about the Hans head and neck safety, whatever the hell, security system, head and neck system, whatever it's called. They were like, oh yeah, he grabbed his helmet and his Hans. And I'm like, the fact that they knew what a Hans was already ridiculous. So
Had a neck support device.
yeah, there you go.
Support.
So I love the fact when you do something, you do it right? Do it correctly. So
yeah, no,
that's super cool.
That's really cool.
All right, your turn.
Spoken about there's one. It's not really a movie, but what I just wanted to mention for people who actually use watches, not just in a movie, but in reality. Like the one race car driver who's a German rally driver, I've spoken about him a few times. Walter Röhrl, he is, I think he's whatever, how old must he be? He's this, I think he's born in 47 or something. So he's old, but he's still advising and consulting Porsche for all of his cars. So he basically, he was the one behind the Carrera GT and the tuning and the setting up and all of his stuff. And all the GT cars are done by him or get his input. So whenever he's racing, even if he's show racing for advertisement or whatever he's doing, or he's just driving somebody around the Nürburgring or so, every time he races, he uses his chronograph.
He starts the chrono.
He says, like, there's no point driving around a racetrack if you're not timing yourself. Every time he races on a track, he times himself. Because this is, I think, you can't get this out of a person, right? He's so competitive about these things that he just doesn't do things half-assed, right? So it's like, and so, sometimes it's a good thing to see that sometimes in the movie industry as well, when they're doing something not half-assed. So if you use a watch, then we do it properly, right? So that's, I don't know, my analogy that I wanted to say. So another movie that was disturbing for me when I watched it the first time, I think it was with Marlon Brando, Apocalypse Now.
Yes, I mentioned that one already. Yes,
you did, but
they had the Seiko and the GMT without a bezel.
And the GMT Master where he
with no bezel on
the bezel, because he was weird and also engraved very, very crudely in the back of the watch, M. Brando or something. Man, he must have been bored. And of course, while a Rolex was a bit of a luxury back then, it wasn't as much of a luxury for a person like him, I guess, in the time. But yeah, that
I'm assuming he popped off the bezel with a knife.
Correct.
And with the same knife, then engraved his name on the back.
Yeah, that must have been. And everything you know now about the whole movie and how it was filmed and what a kind of a terrible situation everybody was in, it just makes you feel, slightly weird. But I wanted to come back to Alien, where we had these science fiction watches. So we had the Seikos and the Casios and all of the different watches. No, sorry, they were all Casios. No, nine. Wrong. They were Seikos and they were Casios. And that's the cool thing. They were selected because they looked futuristic. They were Giugiaro designs at the time. They're also car designer. He designed everything from furniture to cars to watches. And there was the Giugiaro 7A28, which is worn by Ripley. So it's called the Ripley. And then it's the Bishop. That was the one, the Bishop, which I liked, which was an off-center Giugiaro watch, which also looks so weird. It looks like these weird, smileys sometimes when there's such off-center things and they wobble their head. And he was the science officer / android. So these are the watches that I found very, very cool, because even today, and that's always something that I find fascinating with the design from Braun, for example, and others. Even today, it looks futuristic, even though the design is like from the 60s or the 70s.
Once again, it's like the Ichabod, the Braun watches. We could argue that, Nomos with their Bauhaus style, anything Bauhaus is futuristic. There's a lot of things that, look out of place. I think the Porsche design watches look extremely futuristic.
Yeah, that's true. And they have this clarity about them that I think from a design perspective, that they are not as Bauhaus Porsche design, but they're very functional, very legible, very clear in their way of how they want to convey information, right? So that's what I like about it. Yeah. So Dieter Rams was the guy who was behind Brown, right?
Yes,
and he had
yes,
this
yes.
10 principles of good design, and so many people.
He designed a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, and so many designers quoting this person as their inspiration, right, behind design, because he did so thoughtful and cool design stuff. Yeah, and then all he designed was toasters, right? And
no, he designed a lot of weird stuff, right?
Calculators. Yeah, Braun is a company. I lived actually next to the Braun main factory in close to Frankfurt. And it's crazy of what this company actually created. Shavers and obviously so many household goods and other things, speaker systems. He and the company designed so many funky stuff.
Yeah.
Anyhow. Yeah.
All right. You said you were going to talk about Interstellar before you went off.
Interstellar was obviously, the watch had a very prominent moment in this movie where the main character communicates with his daughter across dimensions, whatever.
None of this actually made sense, but
but somehow he made the second hand of the watch go back and forth and create
in Morse code.
And create Morse signals, basically. So in Morse code, he was able to move the second hand back and forth. This movie, Hamilton was asked to create a watch for the movie. And so first they said, well, let's just take any Hamilton watch. And then for whatever reason, they decided that they will make a very special watch only for that movie. And they did. And they had no intention of actually selling it, which is the weirdest thing, right? It was not planned that this watch will actually go to market at some stage. And then, after so many people inquired about it, they decided to basically put it on the market and sell it, and you can still buy it today. And that was
now they made the small one, the one that you had.
Yes,
and I would have bought it. Very
be happy now. You have the pillar.
I still would have taken that too.
I
would have taken both happily. But nonetheless, all right. Yes, and that was of course, the Murph, the Hamilton khaki Murph. At first, it was a huge watch. I'm guessing because they needed it to demonstrate what was happening, right? And then
also because the main character wore it, and then it's supposed to be
a
big.
42 millimeter watch. It was massive. It didn't look right. And then the 39 millimeter smaller one.
I think it was good because it's so supposed to look on the girl really like the dad's watch, right? So that it really shows it.
39 millimeter wouldn't have done
right?
that. Yeah. So that was an interesting one. What else? So we started.
I wanted to say one of these failed things where things go a bit wrong and just don't really move the brand forward. In this case, Hamilton, big success. Huge
success. And then they tried to follow it up again in Tenant, which did not work. Yeah. They also used Hamilton and it just did not do anything for them.
Another one that I think, we have already mentioned two that didn't work. Khalef Bucherer with John Wick and obviously the Bremont with Venom. Mm-hmm. Another one I would say is, what did I want to say, is something that's probably closer to what you think is as not working. Would be Doctor Strange and his JLC.
Oh, yes. I was going to go into JLC, but now with Doctor Strange, I was going to go into it with the Dark Knight. Because he was also, and I love the fact that in the Dark Knight, right, they had two faces, right? Like, what's his name in Batman? Batman and Bruce Wayne, right? He has two alter ego essentially, and the Reverso has two sides. So he was wearing a dual face Reverso.
This is so thoughtful.
It did not catch on at all.
No.
That was thoughtful. It was really cool. And it just didn't make any difference. There was a scene where he opens his watch drawer, I remember. Yeah. And there was just a bunch of JLCs and nobody cared. And the same scene, I think, was roughly in Doctor Strange as well. He opened up a watch drawer and it was all JLCs and nobody cared.
I remember in the watch group when people said like, did he just have a watch drawer with all the watches on watch winders, but the watches are all facing up, dial up? And I think there was this picture of it in Doctor Strange. where he had actually, because
I don't know.
so they're basically just making nothing, because obviously the watch has to be sideways, otherwise the
So
rotor
you're
will
telling
not
me you
work.
put the watch winder
Yes.
horizontally instead of vertically?
Let me
I
see if I
believe
can
you.
find that picture. But that went,
I will
of course,
also
to the
look it up.
that went
Doctor
watch drawer.
Strange watch drawer.
Yeah. Yes, it is indeed. You can-
Yes.
It is.
However,
it is a horizontal watch winders. It makes zero sense.
no, I mean, it could, because you're
No.
moving stuff around. What makes zero sense is that the frickin' reverso is manual wind.
Yeah, but you know that he has also there. I think there's other watches in the drawer. I will put this here in the chat so you can see the.
I see. I'm looking at it
picture.
right now.
But
Yes,
you see the drawer, right? So
Yes,
it is
of course.
horizontal. It makes no sense.
I will put it into our what's it called? Into the
show notes, our Instagram.
show notes, or
So
whatever
anyhow,
the Instagram picture.
Yeah, the point is a watch winder only works if you use the gravity, and then it has to go down. And of course, rotors are always fixed horizontally, so that means you have to put the watch vertically in order for it to have any kind of effect. If you twist the watch or turn the watch horizontally, nothing will ever happen with a watch winder. So obviously that was where the only thing where people said, how could they do this stupid thing, right?
And
then
not surprised.
I also found Doctor Strange
A little strange.
Yeah, from a whole superhero thing, yes. I also found him as a doctor and all of the stuff wearing a JLC, very fitting, very fitting. But
Yes,
as a
absolutely.
superhero with a dress watch, it just seemed to me, I don't know, after he transitioned to a superhero, he should have changed. I mean, obviously he didn't change the watch because it was broken.
He should have gotten
It
to a
had
Polaris.
memory. Yeah, maybe
A
that.
Memovox for his memory.
Maybe the Polaris would have done a bit better than it did. But it was about the watch that was broken and stopped, right? When this happened to him, when his
The
transition
movie was so
happened.
bad, I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I know. I just remember it.
I
because of the
remember
watch.
watching it and thinking, like, is it still going? It's like a 3-hour long movie.
I think it was a watch that was gifted from his wife, and his wife died, and the watch shattered and all of his stuff, and it had an engraving that "Time will tell how much I love you," by his wife.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah,
but
that
I
was-
remember the watch drawer. Okay. All right. Now,
Okay, so that's then
That's
another one of
the
these
JLCs,
didn't
yes.
work as well as maybe
No.
planned.
But JLC also doesn't have the panache, the cachet to do movies. I mean, it's not the same thing. Like, JLC has never been a watch that you're like, oh, JLC, cool. This reminds me of another movie where they did the same thing and it also didn't work. Was they had there's a movie with Cameron Diaz called Bad Teacher.
Okay.
And this came out, I don't know when, and they even played into it, and it was embarrassing. It was Justin Timberlake was the male character, and Cameron Diaz was the female, and she is essentially a bad teacher. She doesn't care about anything, and then this guy is like I don't know if he's a principal or something, or he's just a teacher who's like really, really cares about the students, but they're the opposites, right? But then she realized that he was wealthy. And then all of a sudden she was very interested in him, right? And she said, oh, that's such a nice watch. And he said, oh, it's all right. It's a family business. And she said, oh, what kind of, family business? She goes, well, it's a Jaeger LeCoultre. My family is the, I don't know if it was the Jaeger side or the LeCoultre side, but he went into this in the story that he was from one of these two families. And I'm like, that's bullshit. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Here's this American teacher, whatever, and he is supposedly, related to one of these two families, and that's why he's wearing a JLC. It made zero sense.
Yeah.
But they explicitly mentioned it, and I think once again you wouldn't have done that unless JLC approved it.
There's another watch where I think the person wearing it is super cool, but it just didn't entirely went good. remember the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yes. I don't remember. Once again, it was not a very good movie.
I liked the movie. I thought it was amazing.
I forgot about it.
Once
if I forget about it, it can't be that good. That's my kind of mentality. If I remember it.
Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, I think this was a fantastic couple, these two. Anyhow, so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 6 years ago, the watch that he was wearing, Brad Pitt, as the cool driver / bodyguard of the movie star, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, it was a gold-plated watch, and it was a watch on a what is it called? Bund strap.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a very funny one because it was like a bullhead, right? So it had the crown at 12
at the
and
top.
then the two pushers on 1 and 11 o'clock. And everybody was, after watching this movie, was like, what is this watch? What is this watch? And it was a Citizen, a chronograph automatic, even with a vertical day-date complication at 6 o'clock, right? So it's a very odd one. And so when people actually figured out, it is a Citizen, it had this like half a week of fame. And then it went like, because
nobody knew what it was.
It's actually quite ugly.
And then you figured it out. And then...
It's quite tall. It is just not the nicest watch. And it's like, all right, then. Yeah. So that was the end of it. But it was relatively famous for a short period of time. What do you think about the James Bond No Time to Die?
I thought it was a fantastic watch. I thought, once again, this is the only watch that was made for James Bond. No, sorry, there's two. This was this and the Seamaster, the whatever, the historical Seamaster, with the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 12 bezel. Not the Seamaster 300 professional, but the regular Seamaster 300. This one, and then this titanium No Time to Die. So the Spectre watch and the No Time to Die watch were the only two times where James Bond had a limited edition watch that actually appeared on screen.
Yeah.
Prior to this, they always had limited editions, but never worn. He would always wear regular watches. So these two were, I think, fantastically well done.
I liked the watch, but I did find it just not fitting for James Bond to wear that watch because it looked so out of place on his cool Brioni suits.
It was weird, and that's why I like the Spectre watch. The Spectre watch, the black and gray, that's where we got this kind of Bond NATO strap. It was fantastic. It was a simple black diver. And I think that one is the epitome of it's classy and functional. It does everything. So that one, in my opinion, was better than this titanium one.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, okay, I want to talk about two more things before we end here. We started this whole conversation, you and I, before we even recorded, talking about, you said, did you see this show? So yes. I think we should talk about that show.
Yes, let's do this. I have 7 more minutes and then I have to
we said, did you see this show on Apple TV? And I immediately knew what it was talking about. So I've already seen it. So I saw a trailer for this and I was like, done. I'm adding it to my queue. It's called Your Friends and Neighbors, I believe it's what it's called. And it is about a guy who's one of these investment bros. He loses his job. So apparently he goes through a divorce. He loses his job and he has to maintain his lifestyle somehow, right? He's paying for his ex-wife's house and all this expenses and 2 kids and but essentially he has to pay for stuff. So he realizes that like, I'm stuck here and there's all these huge houses around me and many of these people don't even know what they own anymore. So he said, what if I, essentially stole one of their watches? Not all of them, just one out of a collection of 20 watches. They wouldn't even notice most likely, right? And sure enough, in one case, the cops came and they were like looking at the guy who reported his watch stolen. And they said to him, it was a Richard Mille. And they said to him like, so you're telling me that somebody broke into your house. All they stole was one watch and left these 19 other ones. And they're like, are you sure you didn't misplace it? And he's like, it's a $250,000 watch. I'm pretty sure I didn't misplace it. But the cops didn't believe him. And this is the whole idea is, it just doesn't sound, what would be more logical is they stole everything. but stealing one watch, it just doesn't sound right. So then he had to end up going in and trying to find somewhere to sell these watches, which essentially isn't as easy as he thought. He went into a jeweler, and the jeweler said, okay, I'll give you X amount of money. I think it was a complicated Nautilus. They said, I'll give you $150,000. He said, okay, fine, done. And the guy said, okay, I need the box of papers. And he's like, oh, I don't have the box of papers. So the dealer was like, then I'm not interested. I'm out 100%. And the guy said, come on, give me any price. I really need it. It was a gift. I don't have the box and papers. So the guy refers him to some shady pawn shop, right?
Yeah.
And he goes to the shady pawn shop. And then the lady at the shady pawn shop says, I'll give you like $50,000. And he's like, but the guy at the other shop offered me $150,000. And she said, well, if you had the box and papers, you wouldn't be here. So it's very clear that these are stolen goods, right?
They're hot.
Yeah, they're hot. So in order to buy them. So this is what the movie was about. But all the watches were shown in the kind of like, as there's a pop-up screen with the watch on it. So it was super cool how
and
they
the details and the specs of the watch. And
specs,
all
everything, you know, the RM, blah, blah, blah. The number was in there, everything. It was it was one of these special edition ones. I forgot who the guy was. There was a race car driver. Was he IndyCar, I think?
With the Richard Mille or what?
With the Richard Mille, yeah. It was an IndyCar race car driver, I think, or a NASCAR. I don't know. IndyCar Richard.
What is this actor's name? Dom?
No
name?
idea.
He played this famous advertising.
Yeah, he was in that.
What's this?
Well, also forgot about that.
So useless at this. Anyhow,
yeah, the one that everybody talked about, the advertising agency in the 60s. I don't remember what it was called.
Mad Men.
Mad Men. Yes.
He was in Mad Men.
Everybody wore small watches in that one. That was another one where everybody got into watches, and they were saying how cool these vintage small watches were, right?
Yeah.
I never watched Mad Men, but I just know people talked about it.
I never watched it either, but I thought it is so cool. I liked the main actor because he looked like he was John Hamm.
John Hamm is his name.
He was basically, he epitomizes this entire time frame for me for the 60s and 70s because he's just like fits in like perfect casting.
Felipe Massa. It was Felipe Massa, the RM011. Felipe Massa. And I was like, that's a very strange.
Not only an IndyCar driver.
No, yeah. But I was like, that's a very strange watch to choose because it's an old RM, right? Felipe Massa has been out of the game for God knows how long. And for them to choose this specific one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they had one on hand, I think.
Clearly made by absolute watch nerds. This TV series. You think? That must be.
Anyway, that was funny. But that was a good show. I highly, highly recommend that one. It's currently live, so there's only like 4 episodes into it. But
yeah, I have to watch this then.
Yes.
So good. On that bombshell, we have recommendations to watch, and that was failed watches in movies and successful watches in movies.
Correct. All right.
See you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye-bye.